Well, we are at episode 10, and you are listening to the Beyond Unreal podcast. I am the White Dragon.
And this is Cerberus.
Commits this week. There was a lot of commits, but a lot of them we didn't really get to try a whole lot because GitHub was down and nobody really knew that it was down until...
Yeah.
So what do we have this week?
So there were a lot of little tweaks in movement and a lot of little tweaks on levels and tweaks in a lot of places this week. There were quite a few things from Steve Polge as far as movement specifics. They increased slope dodge, for example, from 0.9 to 0.93 this week.
It started out that it was at 1.
Yeah.
Then I think it was Monday or Tuesday they changed it to 0.9.
Yeah.
And pretty much nobody liked it. So he bumped it up to 0.93. I would be okay with 0.93, but in my own testing, 0.96 is the value that I've been trying. And the way that I've been going about tweaking this value is I look at a specific level and I say, well, the scale of this level seems about right. Should I be able to do this or be able to do that? So for instance, in FO8, I say the big slope on this wall here shouldn't be able to get up that, but the little slopes that allow me to skip the stairs, I should be able to get up that. And then there's also a slope in the curved stairway, and I think that you should be able to slide all the way down that.
Yeah.
And 0.96 is the point at which you feels really good going all the way through that.
Yeah.
0.93, you can get about 300 units high, but only barely. It's almost too hard to jump up to another level like they would use them in Rankin.
Yeah.
That's why I feel like it should really be more like 400 units high that you can get up. Also, again, 0.96 gets you there.
For me, I look at the number and I'm like, I realize it's a scaling factor of some other value, but it seems like if you can go from 1 to 0.9 and that drops you down several hundred units of sloping, that the scaling factor seems a little bit off to me. But that's just like a personal preference for me. I just think it's weird to have to tweak values between 0.9 and 1.0 to get exactly the amount of slide or slope that you want to get out of the movement. I think that sliding up that tall wall on FO8 feels really good while you're playing, but it introduces kind of a flaw into the flow of the level.
I don't think they intended you to be able to go up that wall.
It breaks the flow of the level a little bit for the same reasons that being able to dodge jump over that gap would. The intention there is that you can't easily get across that gap or easily go from the bottom to the top.
Mm-hmm. But more so than that, I think if you were a new player that had never played UT before, but you knew about slope dodge, you would not expect to be able to go up that high. It just looks like something that's too high for you to jump up. Now, another thing on the slope dodge, I went and I made a little map that has some terrain in it, so you can try slope dodging around on the terrain. Kind of seems to me like slope dodge scaling factor doesn't affect the terrain slope dodge very much at all. I'm not quite sure why.
Well, and along with that, it seems like short walls, you can get quite a significant amount of boost out of them. From my perspective, I think that it would make a lot more sense if the amount of boost you got out of a slope dodge was tied more tightly to how long you were touching. So going up something high, you would need to be sliding along something for longer than something that's short like that. It shouldn't give you boost all the way to the ceiling, just hitting a small slope on a little ledge.
So the other big movement thing that they changed this week was the dodge roll, which is basically dodge slide.
Yeah.
With a different name. If you crouch just before you land from a dodge, and you don't hold crouch, you just tap crouch before you land, then you will slide a little bit afterwards.
So they had dodge slide implemented in one of Nick's prototypes earlier on, and the way this one works is slightly different from the way that one worked. So Nick's would work if you slid down a slope, for example, you would continue sliding down the slope for as long as it was until you got to the bottom where you would slow down.
Yeah, like the walkways in Deck.
Right. So this one, there's only a small amount of distance you can get out of the roll, regardless of the slope that you're on. if you do the dodge roll and you hit a ledge, you just kind of get caught on the edge of it. It kind of feels weird right now because with the capsule collision, you kind of get caught on the edge of the ledge, and so you're like set down a little bit from the actual ledge, which is something that Tiger Claws talked about a lot, how the capsule will let you kind of hang off of the ledge before you drop. The dodge roll seems to have the same kind of effect when you get to the edge of a platform or something like that.
So the thing that's frustrating to me about the dodge roll right now is that if you miss it, like say you keep holding crouch, you land and then all of a sudden you go under crouch, and that feels really weird.
Yeah.
With all that said, we really can't say a whole lot about it because the Git was down and we didn't receive this change until Friday night. And when we've tried doing it in net play, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
I would expect, especially now that landing speed factor is higher on it. So a regular dodge is like 0.2. On the roll, it's 0.5.
Yeah.
So I would think that you would want to do it every time, but we haven't really been able to try it in multiplayer.
The big thing here for me is we're talking about some form of momentum conservation again. When you get into momentum conservation, you start asking yourself, how much momentum should I be able to conserve? So if I go into a dodge roll and I jump right at the end of it, should I get to keep some of the momentum from the roll? And if I slide again, should I be able to do a roll out of a jump? To me, it only makes sense that if you can roll out of a dodge, that you can roll out of a jump. And so there's a lot of other questions that I think that it brings up. One of the key things that a lot of UT players like about UT is that there's not a lot of focus on the movement, and momentum conservation isn't an important skill during a game of UT like it would be with other games.
The problem that I'm seeing with dodge jump, I kind of feel like we're starting to become inconsistent. And this goes the same for the boost dodge. Now, there's been a lot of conversation about the boost dodge lately because Epic hasn't really said anything about it. And a lot of people on the podcast weren't sure what we were talking about when we said boost dodge. In fact, I had somebody PM me specifically asking about it. So how do you boost dodge? Boost dodging is basically when you jump between the two key presses of your dodge.
Yeah.
So you can do like left jump left and you'll do a boost dodge.
As long as you're next to a wall.
As long as you're next to a wall.
So I started a thread called Movement Terminology, and we'll put a link to that thread in the description here.
So there's this boost dodge move. When you do it, you go pretty far. In fact, I was playing a deathmatch today, and I was basically boost dodging every chance that I had. I did a lot better. It feels like the way that this mechanic is in right now, if you want to be really good, you have to know how to use it. And the issue is, boost dodge takes you almost as far as dodge jump is. So if there's a problem with dodge jump, why isn't there a problem with boost dodge? And it's the same with the dodge roll. So the dodge roll, again, is something that conserves momentum, a move after your regular dodge. And the only difference between dodge roll and dodge jump is that you stay on the ground for the roll part.
What you were saying before about an inconsistent message, I think, is accurate. The reasons that Epic gave for not having the double jump are things like, can have side effects like scaling, it's a move that you always do. To me, this is just going down that same path. Like, nobody will ever just dodge. You'll always want to dodge roll because you conserve momentum. When you come out of the roll, you're moving faster than you were if you would have just dodged by itself. That's the same if you hit a wall. Like, your speed factor is still the same, so there are cases where it's even better to dodge and roll and slam into a wall and then take off running because you don't lose any velocity at the beginning of the roll. Those are all things that affect the scale. And the other thing you were saying about the boost dodge, I think, is correct too. I mean, if you do a boost dodge and a lift jump at the same time, so there's a room in FO8 where the rocket launcher and the jump boots are, and there's a lift that gets you up in there, and if you boost dodge off of that lift, you can basically jump across the entire room. There's several people on the forums that have brought this up several times, that the boost dodge is overpowered and that it's really causes even more of the problems that dodge jump caused. because of the way they work, they remove control from the mapper. The level designer can't come in and say, I want to make this gap this wide, but I can't because somebody could dodge jump across. So to me, all these extra movement things are taking a lot of control away from the mapper. And to me, that's in contrast to something like wall dodge. You can only dodge off of a wall that's perpendicular to the ground or an obtuse angle from the ground. If it's a concave angle, you can't dodge off of it. And so the mapper has a lot of control in saying, I don't want anyone to wall dodge here, so I'm going to make the wall concave so they can't do that. To me, that's something where you can add movement, but it doesn't take control of the map flow away from the level designer.
So another thing is that I think the reason why it kind of feels right now that there needs to be something else, like I said, I enjoyed when I was using the boost dodge a lot more, is because the base movement speed just isn't fast enough.
Yeah.
In the original Unreal Tournament 99, it was fun just to strafe back and forth.
Yeah.
If the movement speed was faster, I think a lot of the calls for special moves would not be as high, because people would feel like they have enough freedom just from strafing around to do what they want. They made a change to sprint. The change to sprint is that the ramp up to it is a little bit faster, so it still takes 5 seconds for it to start happening, but once it does happen, it's a little bit more noticeable because it happens faster.
Yeah.
That said, the mechanic is still useless. I don't know why anybody would ever... Nobody walks in a straight line long enough, and the maps that are in there right now, there's no way that you would ever get to that point. And I don't see anybody using it in the playtests. If this is a mechanic that they really want in there, they're going to have to make a pretty drastic change to it, because as it stands right now, if you had statistics where you could look and see what percentage of the time people were actually sprinting, it would be less than 1%. And that would be something that I think would be useful to add into the game right now. So Lincoln is totally useless right now. In fact, whenever somebody brings it out in a firefight, I just kind of laugh and run around them because they can't kill me with it. It would be nice to have the statistics to show me at the end of the game how much damage did I do with each weapon and what was my hit percentage, so that we could judge the effectiveness of weapons, and the same with particular movements. So I would like to know how many times I use the dodge or the wall dodge or whatever it is, so that I can prove it with objective numbers instead of just like my feelings.
So the sprint acceleration change doesn't really change the mechanic all that much. I think they raised it from 100 to 125 or something like that.
150, I think.
The way that the sprint works, just so that everybody that's listening understands, is that basically when you're holding down the W key for 2 seconds, you start to accelerate. And you gain acceleration until you're going about 30% faster than the stock movement speed. The side effects of it, to me, are unnoticeable right now. When you're running and you start sprinting, you just don't see it happening. And I think that even with the change that they've made, it's still incredibly difficult to tell that you're speeding up.
Well, I think that the problems with it go well beyond that. If it was actually useful, then those would be maybe some of the things that might bother me about it. But as it stands right now, nobody is ever going to walk in a straight line long enough for the sprint to actually kick in. Even if you're a noob and you have no clue what's going on, nobody walks like that.
I do think that it's counterintuitive to the style of the game.
Yes.
So this is something that I was talking about before. Like, a mechanic being fun doesn't mean that it should be in the game. A mechanic making sense and fitting the style of the game and fitting the movement and all that kind of stuff makes a lot more sense.
Well, there's nothing fun about sprint either, really. It's just there.
I just don't feel like dodge spam is actually a problem that needs to be solved. And so to me, the mechanic is a solution looking for a problem. And because it doesn't actually have a problem to solve, it doesn't add anything useful to the game for me.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. But I would add to it that it doesn't solve the problem that it claims to be trying to solve.
Yeah.
So if the problem is dodge spam, it doesn't solve that problem because dodge spam will still get you faster than the sprint will.
In that same vein, dodge spam has side factors, fringe factors, that play into why you move that way that sprint doesn't have. And so it's impossible to say that a sprint mechanic will solve the problem of dodge spam because it doesn't have all these fringe factors, like that you're moving more randomly or that you're moving at faster speeds and slower speeds, which makes you more unpredictable naturally.
A couple of other changes that they made this week. They fixed a lot of problems with CTF, so it's playable. We've been playing it past day or two. They fixed face up, although face is not really playable because if you take the flag and jump off the side of the map, the flag doesn't get returned.
Yeah.
But we've been playing with some custom community maps and it works pretty well. There's a translocator in there now, which is unlimited, by the way, and you can do some pretty crazy, annoying things with it right now.
Yeah. With the translocator, the way that it's implemented right now does kind of show some of the problems with
there's
having an immediate refire rate and also having unlimited charges.
Yeah. There's no limitation on the fire rate. There's no limitation on the charges, and so you can just zip around everywhere really quickly. And if somebody's translocating, you're not going to kill them.
Yeah, pretty
straight
much.
up right now, unless they're foolish and they translocate right into your shot combo.
Yep.
There's an impact hammer, which seems OP.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was that particular playtest session, but the people that were using the impact hammer were doing about as well, if not better, than the people that were using the rocket launcher.
Well, and I think that the impact hammer's always been pretty overpowered. Like, if you go into a death match with multiple people and whip out the impact hammer, you can usually be fairly successful just blasting people left and right with it and doing pretty well. Like, in other games, you probably wouldn't be the #1 scorer, which when we were doing our playtest with the impact hammer, it was basically like the one person that was always using it was the winner of every single match.
Yeah.
But it was still, good enough that you were competing with the top players in the match.
Yeah, well, now, why might it be OP? So I have a few theories. So one is, it seems like that you don't have to be point blank.
No, you don't.
That in and of itself makes it a lot easier to use. There's been some situations where somebody will be hiding around the corner and they'll get you when you come around the corner because it's not point blank.
Yeah.
Another thing is that because the movement speed is not as high, it's harder to get out of the way and force them to make another pass, which I remember doing a lot in the original UT.
One of the problems that still exists to me right now is that acceleration isn't high enough. And so you have the problem where when you're strafing back and forth, it's still pretty sluggish on the edges. When it's like that, you can't really get out of the way of somebody that's trying to impact hammer you because you'll strafe one direction and they'll correct for it. And as soon as you start trying to strafe the other direction, you have to slow down and then change directions and then speed back up. And that's plenty of time for them to just ram right into you and blast you. I think that problem right there would solve a lot of other problems. Like, for example, I think that one of the problems with the rockets right now is that it's just really hard to change directions and get out of the way. So the first time that you start strafing in one direction, somebody can just correct and shoot you over on that side, and it takes you long enough to change directions back to the other direction in terms of strafing that you can't get out of the way and you're going to get hit.
Alright, so let's talk about the live stream. So in the live stream this week, Chris Perna showed a concept that he made in the editor for a kind of high-tech look. And it was quite an entertaining experience for myself. So I didn't get to watch the stream until I got home. I decided, hey, we should put this on Reddit. So I put it on Reddit, went to sleep, woke up the next day, and it totally blew up. The actual Imgur post itself had well over 1 million views. The image started showing up on all of the game sites. So people It was like the entire collective gaming world just had one gigantic circle jerk over to this image. Maybe that's why it's white. I don't know. But people really liked the concept.
It looks amazing.
Yep.
Like, when they were showing it in the live stream and they were moving around in there and you could see all the shadowing and everything, compared to other games that are out right now, it's head and shoulders above anything else I've seen in terms of quality.
Oh yeah, I mean this was a significant moment. People are going to remember the first time that they saw that screenshot. It reminds me of when the first screenshots for the original Unreal came out and everybody was like, how is this even possible?
Yeah.
It was that far above what's out there.
Yeah. So in 2004, I went to Game Developers Conference, and I went to the AMD booth and sat in a talk that Tim Sweeney and Mark Rain gave. And one of my questions to them at the time was, are you going to make a new Unreal Tournament game that pushes the limits of hardware so far that it takes years for people to be able to say, wow, this is just running amazingly now? This looks like a game where they're pushing that limit hardcore. In 2 years, 3 years after this game is done, we'll finally have people running this game in the maximum level of detail and showing us how good it can look. I think that this was one of those moments, like you say, with the original Unreal, where it was like mind-blowingly good looking. And that's not to say that there's not issues with it, but in terms of the visual quality, how realistic it was just flat out amazing.
Oh yeah. So the comment that kept coming up over and over and over again on the Reddit thread, because I was sitting there trying to comment as much as I could, let people know what's actually going on, because a lot of them didn't even know that they were making a new Unreal Tournament. And if they did, they didn't know that you could literally check it out right now and play it.
Yeah.
But the most common comment was, so is this concept art? Like, is this like a drawing?
Yeah.
Or is this actually in the editor? And that's why when I took the screenshot, I used a screenshot where you could specifically see the editor controls so that people could see that it was actually alive.
Yeah, it was real-time rendered.
I want to talk first a little bit about the concepts behind why Chris Perna did what he did with that map. Because I really feel like he took his time with this concept and put his heart and soul into it. You can tell that he went and he read almost everything that people have been saying on the forum about the art direction and tried to put it into this prototype. I remember we talked in one of our episodes about that in the original Unreal Tournament, a lot of the levels felt like it used to be a place that was used for X, and now it's been repurposed into a tournament map.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of where you were going with the pipes, that in that particular level, you know, what is the function? There's a lot of pipes everywhere. I would like to see elements that actually appear to have a function, because what's on there right now looks cool, but I couldn't tell you what it does or why it's there.
Right.
Whereas when you look at some of the things like Fractal, for instance, in the original Unreal Tournament, or Heel Pod, there was always a little bit of mystery to it, but I still knew that there was some sort of energy beam thing here and it would kill me.
Yeah.
Implementing those kinds of elements would go a long way towards assuaging some of the comments that people have said.
Yeah.
Another thing that I would like to see was more definition on the edges.
Yeah.
So the whole thing is white. And obviously you can't have the whole game can't be white. I mean, people are going to want color. And having some sort of darker trim around the edge, I think would go a long way towards bringing even more visual clarity to see that this is where it drops off.
So, and that was one comment that a few people made, was that it's hard to see the edges in the screenshot. The first thing that I thought when I saw this screenshot was the direction is spot on. Yeah, maybe it's too white. I don't know. When I looked at the super high resolution screenshot they released, the 25 megabyte one, I looked at that one and I said, this is actually more along the lines of what I'm thinking. In the Twitch stream, it was hard to kind of tell, but if you look at the 25 megabyte screenshot, which is like a 10,000 by something screenshot, and zoom in on some of those white areas, they're actually pretty grimy. They've got dirt and smudges and all that kind of stuff on it, and I think that's exactly what we're looking for. So there's going to be some levels that are, you know, it was a mining facility that was just white, and they had it all polished up originally, but then it got dirty. And I think that was something that Chris has said in the past, that they would take a cleaner design and then maybe dirty it up and stuff like that.
So going back to the principles behind it, something I really like. Again, Chris always just says the right things. So he was saying, I want like Christopher Nolan's version of Unreal Tournament, basically.
Yeah.
And I like that. And I think that what they showed really showed that. It's not going to be this cartoony like it was in 2004. I think that they're going back towards Unreal Tournament 99, like on hyper-realism now, and it's going to look amazing. So there's one more thing I want to say about this. So it seems to me that creating this was very much an iterative process, and it was a messy process, right? Because it wasn't just Chris that was involved in it, because he had to get the materials and things like that, and a lot of it was just piecing things together. That was why he didn't commit it, because it's messy and he's going to continue working on it.
Yeah.
But I would say, even though it's messy, I think you should commit just that map as it was shown on that day.
Yeah.
Because right now there's not a whole lot of materials or assets that people can use, and the mappers really, really want to get a hold of it. The first question that people asked me when the GitHub came back up was, did they include it? People want it, and any art assets that you can include, even if they're not in a full map, even if it's not that complete thing that Chris put out, I really think that they should try and add more of those kinds of art assets into the game.
Yeah, I think so too, because there's people that are making maps right now, and to them it's nicer if they can add some elements to just make it look like it's part of this game. Some people have been porting UT maps over, and they've just been taking the textures from UT, stretching them way out, and then applying them to the surfaces, and they look flat out terrible.
Yeah.
And so if people were posting videos and screenshots of these levels, it would be like, holy cow, that's one of the worst looking games I've ever seen from this generation. If we had the level, then it would be easier for us to go in and take screenshots of specific elements and say, why does this make sense? Why does this not make sense? And give more targeted feedback on those elements in the level.
I also think that community members need to start thinking about asset creation differently. So it used to be that if you were going to make stuff, you were either a modeler, where you would make characters, or you were a map maker, you make maps, you were a programmer. In the paradigm that Unreal Engine 4 uses, and you could see in the way the Epic's team was structured and who they brought on the live stream, it's more than that. They have artists that are just material artists and just make materials. If you're an artist out there that wants to contribute to this project, maybe that's something that you would be good at, is just making materials and textures and setting up the shaders and whatnot for that particular surface, or just making static meshes, instead of trying to be the end-all do everything, because you're not going to be able to do that and keep up that level of quality.
And the other thing is to not think about this as a huge waste of your time.
Yep.
So something that was said on the Reddit thread that I thought was very apt was that with this project, Epic's kind of creating a hiring pool of people that are familiar with Unreal Engine 4. And that's totally true. Go in and build some stuff. You can use it as a resume. Go get hired at a company that's using Unreal Engine 4. Start your own company that's using Unreal Engine 4.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if you want to get into the industry, you'd be stupid not to be contributing stuff right now.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. Well, that's all we got for this week. As always, comment and subscribe to our channel. Please join us in our IRC channel. We have a great build system that Raxi has set up to help us play test. It is really the way to play test. If you want to play the game, I really don't see a better way of doing it.
Yep.
So come and play with us.
Please do.
Yep, we'll see you next week.